Good morning, everyone. So I was attending a mass one Sunday, and families were in attendance. During this particular service, there was a family with two children sitting between their parents who sat in the pew next to me. And during this mass, the siblings began to pick on each other, and it got to where one of the parents sat between the children. And then eventually the two adults began to slightly bicker, and I ended up hearing one of the children mutter, "Have mercy," with a sigh of exasperation that would have made you think he had seen everything at 10 years old. And of course, I couldn't help but chuckle and, of course, provide a smile to the parents. But the "have mercy" that we read of here is not one of exasperation, but of pleading. And this pleading came from the lepers of the community who were, as we read, standing at a distance. Now, in the Old Testament passage we heard earlier from 2 Kings, we read of another with leprosy who was sent to the prophet Elisha. But what isn't read here is that Naaman was met by a messenger of the prophet, not Elisha himself. So the reason for the separation was due to their contagion, their being unclean and not allowed to be part of society and being separated from the temple. Okay, so back to Luke, we find Christ headed to Jerusalem, and to do so, he had to go between Samaria and Galilee. He began to enter a village until a group of 10 lepers came as close as they could, which they didn't believe was close enough, and so they shouted, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." Christ heard it and turned towards them. And at this moment, I could only imagine the look on their faces and the possible fear in their hearts. These were individuals who were treated as garbage by society or just straight up ignored. But Christ acknowledged them by looking at them and saying, simply, "Go and show yourselves to the priests." Now, this was a big deal because, you see, to be let back into society with leprosy or having had leprosy, you had to first be healed and then be able to pass what was called a Levitical inspection, which was quite intense. So we had active lepers who called out for mercy, and then Jesus says, "Go get inspected by your priest." This tells us that Christ already healed them, but if that wasn't enough, just look at the next sentence where it even further states the point. Quote, "And as they went, they were cleansed." As they went. Not beforehand, not when they got there, as they went. So on their journey, they were cleansed. And all 10 lepers saw this, but only one turned back, returning to the Christ. And Christ sees him and says, "There were 10 of you. Why did only the foreigner return? But you, the foreigner, your faith has made you well." In the concept of the foreigner, I'm reminded of two particular parables, both of which are in Luke 15. Actually, it's the very first and the very last parable of Luke 15. The first being the parable of the lost sheep, which I'm sure most of us are familiar with. But if not, Luke 15, 1-7. A shepherd has 100 sheep but loses one. And rather than let that one sheep wander in the wild alone, the heart of the shepherd pulls him towards finding that one lost sheep, bringing them home. Then we look at Luke 15, verses 11-32, where we see a son taking his inheritance, leaving home, squandering that inheritance. But he sees his errors. He returns home and is welcomed back warmly by his father, saying, "This, your brother, was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found." Of course, talking to his other son. At the start of Mass, in the penitential rite, and in the Kyrie, we call out to Christ, "Lord, have mercy. Christ, have mercy. Lord, have mercy." It is during these times that we call out to be asked to plead, or to ask and to plead to be cleansed of our spiritual contagions. And Christ tells us, "Go and show yourselves to the priest," which we do by going to the sacrament of confession and by the act of contrition that we pray at the end, "Lord, have mercy."